We are inching closer and closer to the national championship game. And one of the things that is talked about outside of the matchup between Ohio State and Notre Dame is where the national championship game should be played. There is a portion of the college football world who believes that the national championship game should be played in the same spot every year. That there should be like, and it somewhat makes sense with like, the College World Series every year is in Omaha. The Women's College World Series every year is in Oklahoma City. And the everything surrounding that is the road to Omaha, the road to Oklahoma City, which would be a fun kind of spot to be in for college football to say, hey, we are on the road to Pasadena. We are on the road to wherever. In Pasadena, the Rose Bowl is where a lot of people say that the national championship game should be held every year. Now, full transparency, I've never been to the Rose Bowl. I've never seen the sunset over the San Gabriel Mountains as the fourth quarter is about to begin. And I'm told it's the most picturesque setting in college football. I think part of that is probably like New Year's Day in Pasadena probably beats New Year's Day in Columbus or Ann Arbor or State College or insert whatever other Big Ten school. It's cold and gloomy and gray in the Big Ten on New Year's Day, and Pasadena is pretty much the exact opposite of that. So I'm sure there's some of that that plays into it. But the Rose Bowl has made it pretty clear that the Rose Bowl game is going to coincide with the Rose Parade. So if the national championship game is going to be in Pasadena, I think it's just going to be the national championship game in Pasadena. It's not going to be the Rose Bowl because the Rose Bowl is going to happen on New Year's Day, or if New Year's Day is on a Sunday, on January 2nd. There isn't going to be a Rose Bowl part two. There isn't going to be, hey, we'll have the Rose Parade on New Year's Day and the national championship game in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl on January 20th. The Rose Bowl's made it pretty clear that that's their stance, that is, and I've talked about this before. One of the biggest videos we've ever done is me saying that the Rose Bowl is prioritizing a parade over its college football game. You don't get to be the granddaddy of them all when you are saying the parade is more important than the game. And that's what they're saying. They didn't expressly say, hey, the parade is the bigger priority. But when you are saying we will not be willing to move our football game, so it is going to permanently be a quarterfinal spot. It's not going to be a semifinal. It's not going to be the national championship game. When you do that, you are saying you are prioritizing your parade over your football game. And I don't think you get to be the granddaddy of all football bowl games when you're saying your parade is more important than your football game. So I don't think that the national championship game every year should be in Pasadena. I think also that the college football world is maybe just a little bit too fractured to have a one place location every year that, by God, when you're playing for a title, you're playing here. Because I'm here to tell you, like, the idea that the SEC is never going to be in the national championship game again is is gobbledygook. It is not true. And I'm here to tell you that the people at Alabama and LSU and Georgia and Texas and Oklahoma and Florida and Tennessee are going to complain if they have to fly to Pasadena to watch their team in the national championship. And so, yes, I think that the idea of spreading the wealth, so to speak, I don't know that there should be parameters on who can and can't host the national championship. It should be somewhat similar to like Super Bowl selection. Yes. Do you want to play the national championship game at Soldier Field in Chicago on January 20th, where the high is going to be like 4? No. No, I don't think that's a great idea. But can the national championship game be held in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome? Yeah, I think so. Can it be held in Dallas at Jerry World? Yeah. SoFi Stadium, the Rose Bowl, Las Vegas, the Orange Bowl. I guess not the Orange Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Detroit. Yeah, I think all of those places should be available and should be up for wanting to host the national championship game. It should somewhat rotate regionally, in my opinion. Now, if you don't have somewhere in New York slash Boston slash Washington, D.C. that feels like, hey, weather is not going to play a gigantic factor in the game. Because for as much as I enjoy Tennessee having to go to Ohio State in December when it's 17 degrees outside, I don't know that I want that in a national championship game. I don't want there to be the only reason this team won is because it snowed 4 inches. Like, you can't play the national championship game in Buffalo because at that point, like, if it's Navy, Army would be favored to win that game because we're gonna run the ball because too much at stake, in my opinion, my assessment, to be in a situation where the weather and not even like if it rains, like, okay, that's one thing. But it being 5 degrees and snowing and 40-mile-an-hour wind, there's just too much at stake for that to be a determining factor of who holds the gold trophy at the end of the season. So I don't know that it should be 100% like it has to be indoors. Like, I don't it doesn't need to be like Final Four criteria where you have to have 20,000 hotel rooms within 3 miles of the stadium and it has to be indoors. And I don't want to be that quite strict, but if you can get 5 or 6 rotational hosts that, you know what, sometimes it's going to be in New Orleans, sometimes it's going to be in Atlanta, sometimes it's going to be in Dallas, sometimes it's going to be in Las Vegas, sometimes it's going to be in Indianapolis, sometimes it's going to be in Minneapolis, Detroit. And I recognize the idea of nobody wants to go to Detroit, nobody wants to go to Minneapolis. There are great cities all across this country, and I don't think that the national championship game should necessarily be a because one of the arguments for why there are as many bowls as there are is it's a reward for the players, and there are just flat out some locations that I don't think are a reward for the players. On the other hand, I don't think the national championship game needs to be in some tropical destination as a reward for the players. It needs to be a somewhat neutral site that can hold a lot of people really interested in determining who the best team in college football is. So you can get your reward for the players when you play in the Orange Bowl, when you play in the Fiesta Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Peach Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, etc. The national championship game should be about football at the end of the day. All it should be about is football. It shouldn't be about the experience. It shouldn't be, I mean, part of that, sure, it shouldn't be a bad experience, but it shouldn't be about the weather and the lead up to the game, what we're going to do during the week and how much beef we can eat and blah, blah, blah. It should be about what happens between those lines on the field. And what happens between those lines on the field should be determined at 6 to 7 to 8 rotational slots, which is pretty much what it already is. And just at the end of the day, would it be cool to say, like, hey, all roads lead to Pasadena in college football, all roads lead to New Orleans, all roads lead to Atlanta? Sure. But when push comes to shove, it should be about football. And that should be the priority. That should be the most important thing is how do we get a lot of people into one spot to watch this football game. And I recognize that that's an idyllic situation or an idyllic stance because the college football playoff and the NCAA and the conferences, they want to send their sponsors somewhere fun and enjoyable in January. They want them to have a great week. in Glendale, Arizona. They want them to have a fantastic Martin Luther King Jr. weekend in Los Angeles, in San Diego, in Miami, in New Orleans. But put all that aside, what matters most is getting two teams lined up on a field and determining who's the national champion. I recognize that that's probably asking too much, but I think it should be spread around a little bit because I'm here to tell you that when that hospitality portion probably matters more than the regular average fan, etc., getting sent to Pasadena or New Orleans every year because I think New Orleans might be like the second best option there. I think New Orleans might be the one that most people would be like, yeah, if it's not going to be in Pasadena, let's do the Superdome in New Orleans. Those people who spend the big bucks to advertise and sponsor the college football playoff are going to be like, I don't want to go to Pasadena again. I've done this 3 times. I don't want to go to New Orleans. I've done that 4 times. So it's going to continue to rotate. And I think that's probably at the end of the day, the best decision for the college football playoff. That's just my stance. What do you think? You think that the national championship game should be in the same spot every year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.